Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Harry Potter has become such a cultural phenomenon that even those who never read the books or watch the movies know who Voldemort is, what the lightning-shaped scar means, and what a Hogwarts letter looks like. But with great fame comes great misunderstanding. Over time, myths arise, and people begin to believe in things that never existed in the original story. Today I'll reveal the most common misconceptions and beginner mistakes that spread among those who only know Potter through memes, quotes, and short clips. Enjoy watching. Number 1. The tragic hero. Severus Snape is one of the most mysterious and controversial characters in the Harry Potter universe. For millions of fans, he is the embodiment of the noble sufferer, a man whose love for Lily Evans turned him into a martyr, sacrificing himself for her son. But once you remove the romantic glow, the truth becomes clearer. Snape's portrayal in the films is heavily simplified. The movies showed his nobility, but almost none of his darker sides. In the books, Severus is far from an ideal hero. He bullied Muggleborns, befriended future Death Eaters, and even joined Voldemort, sharing his beliefs. He didn't lose Lily because he was misunderstood. He called her a mudblood, and only when Voldemort targeted her did Snape switch sides. Had Voldemort gone after the Longbottoms instead of the Potters, Snape would probably have stayed loyal to him. His change of heart was not driven by conscience, but by love, personal, selfish, and painful. Even worse, Snape himself was the one who delivered the prophecy to Voldemort, the act that doomed Lily. And as a teacher, he was often petty, unfair, and cruel. Yet this is what makes him a great character: complex, contradictory, and human. He is neither hero nor villain, but a man who stumbled and still found the strength to change. The films turned him into a romantic icon. The books made him a symbol of tragic redemption, a story of how love can save even those who have long lost hope. Number 2. The unfair game. One of the most common myths is that in Quidditch, the team that catches the snitch always wins. Neither the books nor the movies state such a rule, but the stereotype persists. Many viewers are sure that once the seeker catches the snitch, the game ends and the score no longer matters. In reality, it's not that simple. The snitch brings 150 points, and yes, the game ends when it's caught. But the total score still determines the winner. The seeker can catch the snitch and still lose if the point gap is too large. A perfect example: the Quidditch World Cup in Goblet of Fire. Victor Crumb caught the snitch, but Bulgaria lost to Ireland. Bulgaria 160, Ireland 170. Crumb catches the snitch, but Ireland wins. He knew he couldn't catch up, said Harry. He wanted to end it on his own terms. That's why the seeker isn't the almighty player many believe him to be. But in the film, that entire scene was cut. And so a subtle sports rule turned into an everlasting fan myth. Number 3. Magic outside Hogwarts. Magic outside Hogwarts is forbidden. This phrase became a meme long ago. Many genuinely believe that no one, not even adult wizards, can perform magic outside school. Where did this misconception come from? From the scene where Harry receives a warning letter for using magic at home, but in fact the rule applies only to underage wizards. Adult witches and wizards can perform magic anywhere. They just need to avoid being seen by muggles. So no, the Ministry doesn't monitor every adult wizard with a wand. The restriction only applies until one comes of age. Otherwise, the entire magical world would make no sense. The main rule is simple: never expose the wizarding world to those who don't believe in it. Number 4. Yin and Yang. After Goblet of Fire hit theatres, many viewers assumed that Beauxbatons was an all-girls school and Durmstrang was for boys only. It's easy to see why the film deliberately contrasted French elegance with northern harshness, but in the books, things are different. Each school accepts both boys and girls. The movie created the gender divide purely for cinematic flair. Parvati was invited to dance by a Beauxbatons student, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. The books even mention a female Durmstrang student, albeit briefly. So the idea of separate wizarding schools is a beautiful invention of Hollywood, not J.K. Rowling. Number 5. The Lovegoods were right. Luna Lovegood and her father Xenophilius are the eternal dreamers of the wizarding world. They believe in everything, from rackspurts to crumple-horned snorkax. To others, they're eccentrics to fans of the soul of magical madness. In the books, the Lovegoods symbolize people who are never taken seriously. None of their fantastic creatures were ever proven real. In fact, the horn of the crumple-horned snorkack in the book turned out to be a blasting-ended scroot horn, which nearly blew up their house. "Mr. Lovegood, that's clearly a blasting-ended scroot horn," protested Hermione, Harry Potter, and the Deathly Hallows. But the films changed everything. In Half-Blood Prince, we actually see rackspurts helping Luna find Harry. And if rackspurts exist, maybe the rest of their nonsense wasn't nonsense after all. That one cinematic scene gave birth to a new fan theory. What if the Lovegoods were right all along? Number 6. Not all Slytherins are evil. Slytherin was never meant to be a house of villains. Its traits, ambition, resourcefulness, and cunning are not evil by nature. They are simply power, waiting for direction. In The Half-Blood Prince, Horace Slughorn proves that. He collects talented students not to manipulate them, but to nurture their gifts. Ambition is not a dirty word, he tells Harry. Slughorn shows the good that can come from Slytherin's drive, a man who values brilliance. But also knows remorse. He hides the memory of the Horcrux not out of cruelty but shame, and that humanity redeems him. Then there is Regulus Black, a name the films nearly erase. A pure-blood Slytherin, once loyal to Voldemort, he turns against the Dark Lord after seeing the truth. "You must destroy it," his letter to Kreacher says about the Locket Horcrux. He sacrifices himself to make that happen. It's a quiet act of redemption that rewrites the story of his house. Slytherins are not all serpents in the dark. Some are the ones who turn back before the abyss. Rowling's world is richer because of them, because light and shadow can live in the same heart. Number 7, Harry, wasn't the only chosen one. The prophecy never named Harry. It spoke of a boy born as the 7th month dies to parents who have thrice defied him. That could have been Neville Longbottom as easily as Harry Potter. Voldemort made the choice himself, and in doing so, sealed his fate. Dumbledore later tells Harry in the Order of the Phoenix, "It was, in the end, Voldemort himself who singled you out. He chose you, and that made all the difference." The Dark Lord, obsessed with bloodlines and power, feared the half-blood more than the pure blood, and thus created his own undoing. Neville's story mirrors Harry's in silence. His parents were tortured into madness. He grew up without them, uncertain, clumsy, often mocked. Yet in the end, he drew the sword of Gryffindor and destroyed Nagini, the final Horcrux. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," he shouts at Voldemort, standing alone, unarmed, before the Death Eaters. That moment, overlooked in the films, reveals the truth of the prophecy. Destiny is not written by words, but by choices. Harry and Neville both fulfilled it. One through survival, the other through courage. Number 8. House elves are not just comic relief. House elves are not comic sidekicks. They are the silent heart of Rowling's moral world. Creatures born into servitude, loyal not by choice but by magic. In the books, Dobby is not simply the adorable savior who snaps his fingers at the right time. He is a freed slave who dares to challenge an entire system built on obedience. When he stands before Lucius Malfoy and says, "Dobby is free," it's not a cute moment, it's rebellion. That single sentence carries more courage than many spells ever could. Hermione understands this better than anyone. In the Goblet of Fire, she founds the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, or SPEW, determined to end the quiet slavery that everyone else accepts. "It's sick," she says, "and the people who love freedom don't even notice others are chained." But no one listens, not even her closest friends. Ron laughs, Harry avoids the topic. That silence is the most painful part. The wizarding world, so proud of fighting evil, is blind to the injustice beneath its own roof. The films cut that entire thread, leaving only Dobby's sweetness and Kreacher's grumpiness. But in the books, these elves expose the truth Rowling wanted to tell, that evil is not always a Dark Lord with a wand. Sometimes it's comfort, habit, the willingness to look away. When Dobby dies, saving Harry, the book says, "Here lies Dobby, a free elf." It's not just a grave, it's a reminder that freedom, even for one small creature, is the bravest kind of magic. Number 9. Dumbledore was no saint. Dumbledore was never just the wise old man smiling over half-moon glasses. The books reveal a man haunted by his past, brilliant, proud, and deeply scarred. As a young wizard, he dreamed of changing the world with his friend Gellert Grindelwald. Together they spoke of creating a new order where wizards would rule for the greater good. That phrase, later used by Grindelwald as his dark motto, was Dumbledore's own. In the Deathly Hallows, he confesses to Harry, "I was gifted. I was brilliant. I wanted to escape. I wanted to shine. I wanted glory." It's not a confession of wisdom, but of regret. Everything changed when his sister, Ariana, died during a duel between him, his brother Aberforth, and Grindelwald. No one knew whose spell killed her, not even Albus himself. That moment broke him. The man who once dreamed of power now feared it. He refused the position of Minister for Magic because he no longer trusted himself to lead. Every decision he made afterward, from guiding Harry to hiding painful truths, came from that guilt. He was not flawless. He was trying to atone. When Dumbledore dies on the astronomy tower, it isn't the fall that matters. It's the weight he carried before it. His calm smile and gentle words hide a man who learned the hardest lesson. Brilliance without compassion leads to ruin. The films turned him into a saint, a symbol of light. The books remind us that he was human, perhaps too human, and that's why he remains one of Rowling's most complex creations, a man powerful enough to change the world, yet wise enough to know he shouldn't. Number 10. Voldemort was more than a villain. In the films, Voldemort is the face of evil, pale, noseless, cruel, a perfect monster to fear. But in the books, Tom Riddle is more than that. He is a child born into emptiness. His mother, Merop Gaunt, dies after giving him life. His father abandons him in disgust. He grows up in an orphanage without warmth or affection. When Dumbledore visits him in The Half-Blood Prince, he meets a boy who already feels the world owes him something. "I can speak to snakes," young Tom says calmly, his eyes cold. It isn't pride, it's defense. From the beginning, he replaces love with power because power cannot leave you. Riddle's transformation into Voldemort is not a sudden fall, but a slow erosion. At Hogwarts, he charms teachers, manipulates classmates, and learns to control fear. When he asks Professor Slughorn about Horcruxes, can you only split your soul once? For instance, isn't 7 the most powerfully magical number? It's chilling in its curiosity. He doesn't seek immortality for glory, but to escape the terror of being forgotten. Death, to him, is annihilation. He wants to live forever because no one ever truly lived for him. Rowling builds Voldemort as a mirror. Where Harry finds strength in friendship, Tom sees it as weakness. Where Harry's scar links him to love, Tom's marks, the Horcruxes, link him to destruction. The final duel between them in the Deathly Hallows is not just good versus evil, but 2 visions of what it means to face death. "You don't know how to die properly, Tom," says Harry, calm and unarmed. That single line breaks Voldemort more than any spell. His greatest fear comes true. He dies a mortal man, unloved and unremembered. The films turned him into a villain to defeat. The books made him a tragedy to understand. Voldemort's story is not about darkness winning. It's about what happens when someone tries to live without love. In the end, Harry's mercy becomes the final act of defiance. He doesn't kill Voldemort to destroy evil. He lets him fall by his own curse, because where love gives life, fear only consumes it. And Tom Riddle, the boy who feared death, could never see that dying with love is the only way to truly live. Number 11. The Phoenix wasn't Dumbledore's pet. Fawkes is not a pet. He is not a songbird perched obediently on Dumbledore's shoulder waiting for orders. In the books, he is something ancient and untamed, a creature bound not by loyalty to a man, but by the call of courage and purity. When Harry faces the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, Fawkes appears not because Dumbledore sent him, but because Harry's heart called him. "Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it," Dumbledore once said, and Fawkes answered that truth. In that scene, the Phoenix descends in a blaze of red and gold, carrying the Sorting Hat. His tears heal Harry's mortal wound. His cry blinds the serpent of darkness. It's not just rescue, it's a miracle of rebirth. Fawkes comes to those who stand against fear, and when his song fills the chamber, it sounds like faith itself taking form. The book describes it as music that seemed to come from inside his own chest, a sound that gave Harry the strength to fight on. That moment defines Fawkes not as a servant, but as a spiritual force. Later, in the Order of the Phoenix, Fawkes saves Dumbledore from the Ministry's trap, taking curses meant to kill. He bursts into flames and is reborn from ashes. It's easy to forget how powerful that symbol is. Fawkes dies to protect, then rises again, carrying the memory of his sacrifice. Dumbledore's calm words, "He's a phoenix, Harry. Phoenixes burst into flame when it is time for them to die," carry both comfort and grief. Through Fawkes we glimpse Dumbledore's own fate, the cycle of loss, wisdom, and renewal that defines his life. The films reduced all that to spectacle, a flash of feathers, a brief flight, a pretty tear. But in truth, Fawkes is the soul of the story's faith in hope. He represents what every hero must become, someone who can burn, fall, and rise again. The Phoenix doesn't belong to Dumbledore, he belongs to the light itself. And when he sings, it isn't for a master. It's for every heart brave enough to keep fighting after the fire. Number 12. Potions were more than magic chemistry. Potions were never just bubbling cauldrons and smoky classrooms. In the films, Snape's lessons look like chemistry gone wrong. Dark room, scared students, and the same tired question. Why can't you all think? But in the books, potion making is an art. It's the heartbeat of Hogwarts education. Every cut of a root, every stir of a spoon reflects the soul of the wizard. A good potion isn't only about skill, it's about intuition, about feeling the magic in your hands. When Harry finds Snape's old textbook in Half-Blood Prince, the story suddenly changes. The scribbled notes in the margins, the shortcuts, the small words crush with blade, not with pestle. They turn an average student into a master. "This book is brilliant," Harry says, amazed after brewing a perfect draught of living death. For the first time, he beats Hermione in her strongest subject, but it's not cheating, it's discovery. Harry begins to understand that real magic lies not in the ingredients, but in the way you think. Snape, or rather the Half-Blood Prince, embodies this truth. He was never just a professor who barked at students. He was an inventor. He improved ancient recipes, rewrote instructions, found new ways to create results. His brilliance was creative, almost poetic. The movies stripped that side away, leaving us only with his cold sarcasm. In the books, every potion he made, from the Wolfsbane to the Veritaserum, was a reflection of his inner world, sharp, dangerous, but full of purpose. Potions are a metaphor for magic itself. They demand patience, risk, and understanding. Add too much power, they explode. Add too little heart, they fail. Like the characters who brew them, they live and breathe through balance. Rowling's world reminds us, true magic is not about repeating spells. It's about knowing why you cast them. Number 13, Hermione wasn't always perfect. Hermione Granger was never meant to be flawless. The films, with all their visual magic and fast pacing, created an image of her as a nearly perfect heroine, the brightest witch of her age, brave beyond question, wise beyond her years, and always unfailingly right. But the Hermione who lives within the pages of J.K. Rowling's books is more complex, more contradictory, and infinitely more human. Her brilliance often clashes with her pride, her compassion with her need for control, and her courage with her fear of failure. These contradictions do not weaken her, they define her. In the first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione begins her journey not as the beloved, composed figure of the films, but as an overbearing and somewhat insufferable know-it-all. When she declares to Ron and Harry, "Now if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed, or worse, expelled," readers glimpse both her sharp wit and her unfiltered arrogance. It is easy to forget that Hermione was not instantly liked by her peers. She was ridiculed for her overconfidence, her rule-following, and her eagerness to prove herself. In the movie, this tension is softened. She comes across as stern but lovable. Yet in the book, Hermione's social awkwardness and need for validation make her a far more realistic 11-year-old girl. Her transformation begins the night she is rescued from the troll, a moment when fear shatters her pride. In that terrifying scene, Hermione is not brave or composed. She hides in a bathroom, paralyzed by panic. Her eventual friendship with Harry and Ron is born not from shared triumph, but from shared vulnerability. This moment is critical because it exposes her humanity. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, Rowling writes. It is not intellect or perfection that binds Hermione to her friends. It is imperfection, fear, and forgiveness. As the story progresses, Hermione's intelligence becomes her greatest asset and her greatest trap. She believes deeply in the power of knowledge and that every problem can be solved by the right spell or the right book. Yet this belief often blinds her to the complexity of the world around her. In the Chamber of Secrets, while others suspect Hagrid or Harry, Hermione insists on trusting logic, but logic fails when magic turns dark and unpredictable. Her petrification at the hands of the basilisk is symbolic. Even the brightest mind can be frozen by forces it cannot understand. The films capture her intelligence, but they rarely show the cost of it, the isolation of being the one who always seems to know more, and the burden of having to be right. Perhaps the most striking example of Hermione's moral complexity appears in the Deathly Hallows when she performs the spell Obliviate on her parents. In the film, the scene is hauntingly beautiful, a silent act of love and sacrifice, but in the book, the emotional and ethical weight of it is far heavier. Hermione does not simply hide her parents, she erases their entire memory of her existence, rewriting their lives so that they believe they are different people. She later admits this with quiet anguish, saying, "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins." The action raises profound questions. Was it right to take away their free will for their safety? Could she live with the knowledge that her love had rewritten their minds? The Hermione of the films performs this act as if it were noble and tragic, but the Hermione of the books performs it as a desperate young woman choosing between love and morality. Hermione's sense of justice also carries sharp edges. In The Goblet of Fire, her creation of SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, reveals both her compassion and her blindness. She is outraged by the servitude of house elves and launches into a campaign to liberate them. "You know, house elves get a very raw deal," she declares. Yet she refuses to see that most elves do not share her desire for freedom. Her moral certainty blinds her to their perspective. Dobby may want freedom, but Winky and Creature see her. Activism as an insult. Her inability to understand that her version of justice might not be universal makes her human, an idealist who sometimes imposes her ideals without listening. The films turn this into a background joke, almost skipping over the discomfort her campaign causes. In truth, SPEW exposes the arrogance of good intentions and the difficulty of changing a world that resists change. Another revealing episode lies in The Prisoner of Azkaban, where Hermione's friendship with Harry and Ron fractures under the weight of stress, jealousy, and mistrust. When Ron's rat, Scabbers, disappears, Hermione's cat, Crookshanks, is suspected of eating him. Ron's anger is fierce, and Hermione's defense of her pet is stubborn. "Fine, be like that," she snaps, refusing to apologize. The conflict lasts for chapters, showing a stubbornness and emotional rigidity that no film ever fully captured. Later, when she slaps Draco Malfoy after his mockery of Hagrid, readers see her temper in full force, an impulsive flash of emotion that defies her usual rationality. It is moments like these that make Hermione more than the moral compass of the story. She is flawed, impulsive, and deeply emotional beneath her logical surface. Number 14. Hogwarts isn't the only wizarding school. For many fans of the Harry Potter films, Hogwarts stands as the beating heart of the magical world, a towering castle cloaked in mist where every portrait whispers and every corridor hides a mystery. Cinema, with its sweeping shots of the Scottish Highlands and the thunderous applause at the House Cup, made Hogwarts seem not just important, but central, as if magic itself began and ended there. Yet this is one of the great misconceptions the films quietly planted. J.K. Rowling's universe is far larger than those stone walls, its boundaries stretching far beyond Britain. In truth, Hogwarts is but one of several great magical schools that span continents. Each born from its own history, its own culture, its own kind of magic. The books hinted at this vastness, though subtly, as if Rowling were leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for the reader who wished to look beyond the familiar towers. When Albus Dumbledore mentioned the Triwizard Tournament, he spoke of bringing together young witches and wizards from the 3 largest European schools of magic. That moment, fleeting, almost incidental, was a window into a much larger world. The films, however, treated Beauxbaton and Durmstrang as mere guests, colourful decorations for a single event. Their headmasters appeared in grand entrances, their uniforms exotic and unfamiliar, but little was said of what those places truly were. Viewers left the theatre believing they had seen the full map of magic, when in truth they had only glimpsed a corner. Beauxbaton Academy of Magic, hidden somewhere in the mountains of southern France, has long been associated with elegance, grace, and refinement. Its students, described in Goblet of Fire, are usually very polite and well-mannered. The air of sophistication around them is no accident. The Academy's founder, a witch named Olympe Maxime, believed that beauty and discipline were part of the magical arts themselves. Imagine halls adorned with enchanted chandeliers that diffuse the scent of lavender, or dueling lessons where wand movements resemble a dance. Magic at Beauxbaton is less about conquest and more about harmony, the belief that the aesthetic form of a spell reflects the purity of one's intention. It is a very different philosophy from the rougher, more practical education of Hogwarts. By contrast, Durmstrang Institute, often shrouded in the snows of Northern Europe, takes pride in discipline and strength. The books describe it as a school that does not admit Muggle-born students, and though this prejudice makes it sound harsh, Durmstrang also holds a deep respect for magical craftsmanship and combat. Victor Crumb, the stoic Quidditch champion, came from its ranks, a living symbol of the school's rigour. Durmstrang students learn not only spells but strategy, the science of magical dueling, and even the control of darker forces. Where Beauxbaton teaches the beauty of balance, Durmstrang teaches the danger of power, a reminder that magic, untempered, can destroy as easily as it protects. Beyond Europe, the world of magic becomes even more fascinating. In the forests of Massachusetts stands Ilvermorny, the North American school of witchcraft and wizardry. Founded in the 17th century by Iseult Sayre, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, it began humbly as a stone cottage and grew into a majestic institution. The sorting ceremony at Ilvermorny is unlike any other. Instead of a talking hat, 4 statues, the horned serpent, Wampus, Thunderbird, and Pukwoodgi, decide the fate of new students. When a student stands before them, Rowling once wrote, "If one or more of the carvings move, the student has been chosen." These creatures symbolize intellect, courage, adventure, and heart. It is said that when multiple statues move for a single student, the individual must choose, for even the magical world acknowledges that identity is built by choice, not destiny. But the most remarkable thing about Ilvermorny is not its ceremony, but its wands. Unlike in Europe, where wand makers like Ollivander rely on ancient lineage and inherited materials, Ilvermorny's wands are crafted from North American woods and enchanted with elements unique to the land, thunderbird feathers, for instance. No 2 wands are alike, the founders taught, and each chooses its master by the quality of their soul. Such emphasis on inner virtue over ancestry marks a profound contrast with the traditionalism of Hogwarts. It reflects America's own cultural myth, that greatness is not inherited, but earned. Far across the Atlantic, beneath the shadows of Mount Kilimanjaro, lies the legendary school of Ouagadougou, the oldest and largest magical institution in Africa. Its students, according to Rowling's writings, are capable of performing complex spells without the aid of wands. This single fact rewrites much of what we think we know about wizardry. Wandless magic is often portrayed as difficult or dangerous in European circles, but in Wagadu it is an art refined over centuries. Young witches and wizards there write on the air itself with clouds of coloured smoke. Their spells are born from harmony with nature, not dominance over it. A simple gesture may call rain, heal a wound, or speak to animals. It is said that African magic flows through the world like the wind, unseen but felt by all who stand in its path. Wagado's approach to education reflects the continent's deep spiritual traditions. Students are taught astronomy from the tops of stone towers where they track the constellations not for navigation but for understanding destiny. They learn to communicate with the spirits of ancestors, to balance life and death as two sides of the same power. Unlike Hogwarts, which divides students into houses that often compete, Wagadu fosters communal unity, a belief that a spell cast for oneself is weak, but a spell cast for all is eternal. This sense of collective purpose defines the African school's philosophy and shows how differently magic can be interpreted through culture. Number 15. Wands don't choose randomly. There is a quiet moment in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone when Garrick Ollivander peers at the young boy before him with eyes bright and pale as moons. He murmurs, "Curious, very curious," as the phoenix feather wand settles in Harry's hand. That simple phrase and the strange spark of connection that follows has become one of the most quoted ideas in the entire wizarding world. The wand chooses the wizard. Yet this truth, so layered and mystical in the books, was simplified in the films into a moment of visual magic, a flash of light, a gust of wind, and a boy chosen by destiny. What disappeared in translation was the deeper meaning behind this act, the living bond between wand and soul, the almost spiritual echo of who a wizard truly is. In Ollivander's dusty shop, surrounded by thousands of boxes and the scent of polished wood, the scene in the book unfolds not as spectacle, but as revelation. The shopkeeper studies Harry not as a customer, but as a question. Every wand Harry tries rejects him, snapping air, fizzing sparks, dull silence, until one, made of holly and phoenix feather, fits like an extension of his very being. The resonance is instant. Ollivander's words, soft yet trembling with wonder, suggest more than curiosity. The phoenix, whose tail feather is in your wand, gave another feather, just one other. It is curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. The wand, then, is not a random artifact. It is a mirror of the wizard's essence. Holly, a wood associated with protection and overcoming anger, complements Harry's nature as someone who constantly battles his own temper and his sense of justice. The phoenix feather, born from the bird of rebirth and flame, symbolizes resilience, purity, and resurrection, all themes that define Harry's life. Together, these materials are not arbitrary choices. The wand recognized him not for what he was, but for what he would become. A boy bound to life and death, courage and compassion, and ultimately the force of self-sacrifice. In the book, this choice feels almost sacred. The wand responds to Harry's potential rather than his power. This philosophy that the wand perceives the wizard's essence is central to understanding the world J.K. Rowling created. A wand is not a servant, but a companion. It grows attuned to its owner's emotions, instincts, and magical rhythm. In the Deathly Hallows, Ollivander later tells Harry, "The wand learns from its master. It may transfer its allegiance if it is won." The verb learns is key. It transforms the wand from a tool into a sentient participant in the story of magic. Each spell cast is a conversation between wizard and wand, a harmony, or sometimes a discord, of will and wood. Take, for instance, the wand of Draco Malfoy. 11 inches of hawthorn wood with a unicorn hair core, stubborn, temperamental, and difficult to master. Ollivander describes hawthorn as strange wood, contradictory, suited to a wizard with both light and shadow in his heart. Draco, proud yet uncertain, cruel yet fearful, embodies this contradiction perfectly. His wand mirrors the inner war between his upbringing and his conscience. When Harry later disarms Draco at Malfoy Manor, it is not a mere tactical victory. The wand's allegiance shifts because it feels the stronger will. In that moment, Draco's uncertainty collapses before Harry's determination, and the wand's sentient understanding of strength changes its loyalty. This act later determines the fate of the entire story. When Harry faces Voldemort in the final battle, the Elder Wand, supposedly the most powerful wand in existence, refuses to kill him. It senses that its true master is not Voldemort, but the wizard who disarmed Draco, the previous master of the wand. What appears to be a technical detail in film, the idea that the wand belongs to Harry is, in the books, profoundly philosophical. The wand does not obey ownership or inheritance. It follows loyalty of spirit. The Elder Wand, ancient and proud, acknowledges the lineage of courage, not cruelty. The films, with their dazzling duels and glowing beams of light, transformed these moments into spectacles of visual energy. But in the books, each flash of light has an emotional reason. The colours of spells, the recoil of a wand, even the warmth in its handle, are not aesthetic, but psychological. When Harry casts Expelliarmus, it is not just disarming. It is the expression of who he is, a boy who defends rather than destroys. The wand resonates with that principle, amplifying his moral compass through magic. That is why Expelliarmus becomes his signature spell, and why, in the end, it defeats the Dark Lord. The connection between wand and wizard can also be seen in Voldemort himself. His wand, yew, with a phoenix feather core, mirrors death and resurrection, the very essence of his obsession. Yew trees have long symbolized immortality through decay. They grow from their own fallen branches. The phoenix feather shared with Harry's wand binds them in destiny. Both wands are born from the same magical creature, Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix. This shared origin is not coincidence, it is literary design. Voldemort and Harry are two reflections of one cosmic equation: life versus death, compassion versus domination. Their wands recognize this kinship, which is why they repel each other in the priori incantatem phenomenon. The twin cores refuse to destroy one another because, on some level, they belong to the same soul divided by choice. That moment, rendered as golden light in the films, is described in the book with haunting imagery. The beams of green and red entwine, forming a dome of shimmering fire. Ghostly echoes of the dead, Cedric, Frank Bryce, Bertha Jorkins, Harry's parents, emerge to shield him. It is not a battle of spells, but of spirits, and the wands themselves conduct it as though they understand the moral weight of the fight. Ollivander's earlier words echo here. The wand chooses the wizard, but in doing so, it also shares his fate. Number 16. The wizarding world doesn't hide only from muggles. The films about Harry Potter gave the audience a world of bright spells, brave children, and the eternal fight between good and evil. But behind the magic and charm lies something the movies rarely showed: the disturbing depth of the wizarding world itself. In the books, J.K. Rowling never painted the magical society as a paradise hidden from muggles. Instead, it was a reflection of the same darkness, secrecy, and corruption that exist in the non-magical world, Magic did not purify the soul, it only made the shadows more dangerous. The real secret was not the existence of wands or charms, but how deep the deception inside that world ran. Within the Ministry of Magic, everything looked clean and orderly. Polished floors, golden gates, and bureaucrats walking with self-importance. Yet behind those doors were secrets more terrifying than any dark spell. Cornelius Fudge, for instance, feared not Voldemort's rise as much as he feared losing power, his denial of truth, his manipulation of the press through the Daily Prophet, and his persecution of those who spoke out. All of this revealed a world ruled by fear, not justice. The films made the ministry look inefficient and pompous, but the books exposed it as something much darker, a machine that would rather destroy its own citizens than admit its mistakes. Azkaban stood as the most horrifying symbol of this system. The films showed it briefly, Grim Island guarded by Dementors, but they never revealed the moral rot it represented. In the books, Dumbledore himself questioned the ethics of locking human beings in a place where their souls were slowly eaten. "Ask yourselves," he once said at the Wizengamot, "whether the ministry has the right to use creatures that drain hope and happiness." But his words, buried under political fear, changed nothing. How many prisoners were there in Azkaban? No one knew. How many of them were truly guilty? That question was even more dangerous. The very existence of Dementors, beings that thrive on despair, showed that the wizarding world tolerated evil as long as it served their order. There were even darker whispers, the kind that never reached the silver screen. It was said that certain prisoners simply disappeared. Officially, they did not survive, but no bodies were ever seen. The ministry's Department of Magical Law Enforcement turned a blind eye. In truth, there were rumors of experiments, cruel tests meant to study the Dementors' nature and how they could be controlled. The wizards prided themselves on being better than Muggles, but they had their own kind of prisons, their own laboratories of horror, hidden behind the shimmering veil of the magical world. The films preferred not to show this. It was easier to let children believe Azkaban was merely a scary tower on a rock. Even Hogwarts, the sanctuary of learning, was not free from hidden corruption. Beneath its enchanted ceilings and laughing ghosts existed a hierarchy as old as the castle itself. Blood status mattered. Pure blood, half-blood, mud-blood. These were not mere insults, they were social classifications. The films touched this theme lightly, but in the books the tension between students like Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger symbolized centuries of division. Entire families, the Blacks, the Malfoys, the Lestranges, built their wealth on the idea that magic belonged to a chosen few. The rest were tolerated, but never accepted. Behind every grand feast in the Great Hall stood centuries of prejudice, unspoken but powerful. Rowling also revealed that the magical government kept its own population in ignorance. Entire departments existed to erase memories, alter facts, and rewrite events. The Obliviators were not only a safeguard against Muggles, but a weapon against inconvenient truth. When the Ministry wanted to silence witnesses, it was not difficult. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry witnessed Voldemort's return, the Ministry simply declared him delusional. It wasn't just denial, it was calculated propaganda. "The boy who lies," screamed the headlines. Wizards didn't need Muggles to suppress truth. They were quite capable of doing it themselves. One of the most striking examples of hidden cruelty was the fate of house elves. In the films, they appeared briefly as comic relief. Dobby's big eyes, creatures grumbling. But the books exposed an ancient injustice that the magical world chose to ignore. Elves were enslaved, bound by magic to serve wizards for generations. "They is happy to serve, sir," Dobby once said, his voice trembling between loyalty and pain. But that happiness was a spell, a cultural illusion. Hermione saw through it and created SPCW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, yet she was mocked even by her friends. Wizards could fly, heal, and vanish, but they could not free their own servants. The films avoided this discomfort, turning it into a background detail instead of a moral wound. Then there were the unspeakables, the mysterious employees of the Department of Mysteries. The movies reduced this place to a battle scene with glowing prophecies. But in the books, the department symbolized something much deeper. The endless thirst for forbidden knowledge. Wizards experimented with time, death, and the human mind itself. In Order of the Phoenix, Rowling described rooms where voices whispered from behind closed doors and a chamber that held the mysterious veil, a gateway between life and death. No one knew who entered those rooms or what experiments were done there. The secrecy was absolute. "We are not meant to understand it," said Arthur Weasley once, but the question remained. Who decided what humanity was not meant to understand? The magical creatures themselves suffered under the same veil of secrecy. Centaurs, giants, werewolves, all treated as outcasts. The Ministry classified them, regulated them, even hunted them when convenient. Remus Lupin, one of the kindest characters in the series, lived in poverty because of laws that forbade werewolves from employment. In Prisoner of Azkaban, he told Harry, "People like me are shunned." The films showed his bravery, but ignored his despair. Wizards who prided themselves on tolerance could not tolerate those who were different. Even Hagrid, half-giant and loyal, was treated as less than human by the very people he protected. This hypocrisy was not cinematic, it was moral rot. The corruption extended even to the education system. Defense against the dark arts, the very subject meant to protect students, was cursed, literally and symbolically. Each new professor represented a fragment of truth about the world's hidden dangers. From Quirrell's secret allegiance to Voldemort to Umbridge's cruel control, Hogwarts became a miniature reflection of the Ministry's manipulation. Dolores Umbridge, in her pink cardigan and false smile, embodied how evil hides behind rules. "You will do as I tell you," she said, as she carved words into Harry's hand. Her office was filled with kittens, her punishments with blood. The films captured her wickedness but failed to show the system that allowed her to exist, a bureaucracy that rewarded obedience over morality. The magical press, too, was part of the deception. Rita Skeeter, with her enchanted quill, turned lies into headlines. Disgraced boy wizard, Dumbledore's dark secrets, every scandal served the Ministry's agenda. But what the films overlooked was how easily the public accepted these lies. It wasn't just one journalist, it was an entire culture that preferred illusions over uncomfortable truths. Rowling used this to show how easily truth dies when entertainment replaces integrity. The wizarding world was not hidden from muggles, it was hidden from itself. Even the Order of the Phoenix, the supposed guardians of light, held secrets. Members like Snape, who lived a double life, or Dumbledore, who concealed the full truth about the prophecy, proved that even those on the side of good manipulated others for the greater good. That phrase, once associated with Grindelwald, haunted Dumbledore's conscience. "I was convinced I was doing right," he admitted in the book, revealing that righteousness can mask ambition. The line between light and dark, between truth and secrecy, blurred long before Harry picked up his wand. If the films showed magic as a symbol of hope, the books showed it as a burden. Power always demanded payment. Every spell, every invention, every law carried consequences. Wizards erased memories, enslaved creatures, and imprisoned souls, not out of malice, but out of habit. It was their way of maintaining order. The idea that magic hid only from muggles was a convenient myth. The real truth was that magic hid from itself, from the conscience that refused to see. The wizarding world, when stripped of its glamour, was a place of deep contradictions. It celebrated courage but punished honesty. It preached unity while dividing its own people. The films gave us a fairy tale. The books gave us a mirror. Behind the laughter of the Weasleys, behind the triumph of Gryffindor, behind the sparkle of wands and feasts, there was always something unsaid. The hum of secrets, the shadow behind the light. It was not a paradise behind a curtain. It was a society built on silence. And silence, as Rowling showed again and again, is the most dangerous magic of all. Number 17, there are more than 3 Deathly Hallows. The legend of the Deathly Hallows, as told in The Tales of Beedle the Bard, has always carried an air of mystery, but the films reduced it to a short, animated fairy tale and 3 shining symbols, a wand, a stone, and a cloak. They made it seem like a legend with clear boundaries, 3 sacred objects bound by destiny. Yet in the books, the truth behind the Deathly Hallows is far deeper and darker. What if those 3 artifacts are only the visible tip of something far greater? The manifestation of humanity's endless attempt to cheat death, an effort that appears in countless forms throughout wizarding history. When Xenophilius Lovegood explained the Hallows to Harry, Hermione, and Ron, he said the 3 objects were real enough and that together they made their master the conqueror of death. But the very notion of conquering death is what drives almost every tragedy in the wizarding world. Voldemort sought it through Horcruxes, Dumbledore through wisdom and penance, Grindelwald through power. The Hallows, then, are not a set of 3 toys, but symbols of 3 paths toward immortality: love, mastery, and deception. Rowling's narrative hides this truth beneath myth and metaphor, but it runs through every corner of her world. The films treat the cloak of invisibility as a convenient tool, yet in the books, its legacy is sacred. Unlike ordinary disillusionment charms or invisibility cloaks made from Demigee's hair, Harry's cloak never fades, never weakens, never tears. It was given by Death himself, according to the tale, but in reality, it represents something more profound: the willingness to accept death rather than to flee it. He greeted death as an old friend, the tale says, of the 3rd brother. That phrase encapsulates what sets Harry apart from Voldemort. The cloak, used with humility, is not an escape from death, but a shelter that allows one to face it with grace. Contrast that with Voldemort's Horcruxes, pieces of a soul torn apart to bind a wizard to the living world. In a twisted sense, these, too, are Deathly Hallows. They are born from the same fear that drives men to seek the Elder Wand or the Resurrection Stone. Voldemort's ring, his diary, his locket, his cup, his diadem, the snake, all serve one purpose: to outsmart mortality. But each object carries the price of corruption. Dumbledore himself acknowledged that, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure, yet Voldemort, whose mind was anything but organized, saw death as the ultimate defeat. His Hallows were not gifts, but curses. Rowling's prose gives subtle clues that the Hallows are not unique. The true master does not seek to run from death, Dumbledore tells Harry. He accepts that he must die. That line, spoken in the Deathly Hallows, separates the sacred from the profane. Horcruxes, like cursed opals, blood-stained goblets, or the Mirror of Erest, are other reflections of humanity's inability to accept mortality. They are false Hallows, echoes of the original legend, born from obsession instead of wisdom. Take the Resurrection Stone. The films present it as a shiny pebble hidden inside a snitch, used for a sentimental goodbye. But in the book, the stone's story is tragic. The second brother turned the stone thrice in his hand and brought back his lost beloved, only to find her sad and cold, as though she had long been separated from him. That image echoes throughout the saga, in Voldemort's pale, almost spectral existence, in the ghostly figures haunting Hogwarts, and even in Dumbledore's guilt-ridden memories. Every attempt to call the dead back brings suffering. The stone is a warning disguised as a miracle. If we look closer, many magical artifacts in the wizarding world share the same essence as the Hallows. The Mirror of Erest shows the viewer not what is true, but what they most desire. Dumbledore once admitted, "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live." The mirror tempts with illusion, a kind of immortality through fantasy. The Sorcerer's Stone, created by Nicolas Flamel, grants eternal life through alchemy, but its destruction marks the first moral victory of the series. Harry learns early that immortality achieved through greed leads only to ruin. These are all Hallows in their own right, symbols of mankind's refusal to let go. Even the basilisk fang that destroys Horcruxes and the sword of Gryffindor that absorbs that which strengthens it mirror the same cycle of death and rebirth. The fang, born of a deadly serpent, becomes an instrument of purification. The sword, tempered in courage, cleanses the sins born from fear. Each is a step on the same spiritual ladder the three brothers once climbed, from arrogance through grief to acceptance. What the films never captured is the emotional gravity of Dumbledore's relationship with the Hallows. The books reveal his youthful desire for the Elder Wand and his later remorse after his sister Ariana's death. "I was fit to own the Elder Wand," he tells Harry's spirit, "but not to wield it." His confession transforms the legend into a meditation on human frailty. The wand itself, which grants power over death through mastery, mirrors Dumbledore's temptation to control fate. It cost him everything. That is why he later refused to pursue the other Hallows. His experience proves that the real danger is not in the objects, but in the desire they awaken. Each brother in the original tale represents a different response to death. The first seeks dominance, the second denial, the third acceptance. Within the larger story, these archetypes appear again and again. Voldemort is the first brother obsessed with control. Snape, haunted by lost love, embodies the second. Harry, who walks willingly into the forest to die, is the third. When he turns the Resurrection Stone and greets the ghosts of his parents, Sirius and Lupin, he fulfills the prophecy of the tale. He becomes the true master of death, not by surviving, but by surrendering. But what if the tale's message extends beyond individuals? In the wizarding world, every dark object created from fear or grief becomes part of a greater network, a chain of Hallows that spans centuries. The cursed opal necklace from Borgin and Berks, which kills those who touch it, the Hand of Glory, offering light only to its holder, even the Marauder's map revealing the unseen, all reveal aspects of the human desire to transcend limits. The line between artifact and allegory blurs. Dumbledore's words to Harry in King's Cross: "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love," form the moral spine of the entire legend. Love, not magic, is the real Hallow. The protection that Lily Potter left her son is an invisible cloak of another kind, one that shields not by hiding, but by connecting souls. That is why Voldemort, despite all his artifacts and spells, remained mortal. He never understood love's alchemy. The films, with their visual grandeur, simplified this complexity into spectacle. The animated sequence showing the three brothers is breathtaking, but it isolates the legend, stripping it of its echoes throughout wizarding history. The story becomes an episode, not a theme. The books, in contrast, weave the Hallows into the moral DNA of the saga. Every act of courage or cruelty circles back to that same primal question. How does one face death? When Harry repairs his wand with the Elder Wand and then decides to place it back in Dumbledore's tomb, it is not an act of rejection, but of transcendence. He refuses to be the master of death because he has already mastered himself. This moment mirrors the humility of the third brother wrapping the cloak of invisibility around his son before greeting death. The circle closes not with conquest, but with peace. Yet the idea that there are only 3 Hallows limits the reader's imagination. The wizarding world is full of objects born from the same impulse to overcome mortality. From Grindelwald's quest for the greater good to Snape's desperate attempts to preserve Lily's memory through the Doe Patronus, the pattern repeats. Each wizard creates his own Hallow, tangible or invisible, and pays the price. If we read the saga as an extended myth, we begin to see that the true deathly Hallows are not objects at all, they are choices. The Elder Wand stands for the lust for power, the resurrection stone for the inability to let go, the cloak for acceptance through love. But these are only the 3 faces of an eternal triangle. Every character in the series carries a version of it within their soul. The fear of death births greed, grief, and wisdom. 3 brothers walking side by side. Thus, beyond the glittering relics and fairy tale imagery, the Hallows form a mirror reflecting the deepest truth of Rowling's world. Immortality is not in escaping death, but in understanding it. Whether through Horcruxes, stones, or love's sacrifice, wizards have always sought to grasp what lies beyond the veil. And in every attempt we glimpse the same paradox, that only by embracing mortality can one truly conquer it. Number 18. Wizards aren't all powerful. In the glittering world of the Harry Potter films, it often seems that a flick of the wand can solve any problem. Harry lifts his wand, light bursts forth, and the impossible becomes possible. The audience learns to believe that magic is limitless, that spells are shortcuts to miracles. Yet, if one looks beyond the cinematic spectacle and returns to J.K. Rowling's written world, the illusion fades. Magic, in the books, is not omnipotence. It is merely a craft, bound by rules, by the limits of human understanding, and by moral weight. Wizards are powerful, yes, but far from invincible. They stumble, fail, and often cannot mend what truly matters. The Resurrection Stone is perhaps the clearest symbol of this limitation. When Harry stands in the Forbidden Forest clutching that ancient relic, he calls upon the shades of his parents, of Sirius, of Remus. They appear, yes, but not as living beings. Rowling writes, they neither spoke nor moved, and yet Harry could see them quite clearly. They are echoes, memories given shape by longing. No spell, no charm, not even a deathly hallow can reverse death. This single moment shatters the film's illusion of all-powerful wizards. Magic, even at its most sacred, cannot defy the finality of life. It only allows a whisper from beyond, a comfort before the end. Throughout the books, Rowling repeats this truth in quieter ways. Take Dumbledore, the wisest wizard of his age. He possesses more magical knowledge than perhaps anyone alive, yet he confesses to Harry, Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. Here lies the key. Love, compassion, and choice are forces greater than spells. Dumbledore, despite his mastery, cannot undo the chain of tragedies that his own ambitions once set in motion. His sister Ariana remains dead. His brother Aberforth remains bitter. His brilliance does not spare him regret. If magic were truly omnipotent, Dumbledore's life would have been flawless. Instead, it is a tale of failure and humility. Even the so-called unforgivable curses, which seem to grant godlike control, expose the limits of power. The Imperious Curse bends another's will, but only to a point. As we learn in Goblet of Fire, some resist it through sheer strength of mind. When Moody, or rather Barty Crouch Jr., teaches it to the students, Harry is the one who begins to fight it off. This small defiance is crucial. Even the darkest magic cannot fully enslave the human spirit. The idea that magic can dominate everything is an illusion shattered by the courage of a single boy. The Cruciatus Curse, too, shows that pain inflicted through magic is hollow compared to emotional suffering. Bellatrix Lestrange, who revels in cruelty, cannot understand that true torment is not physical, but moral. When Harry uses the same curse on her after Sirius's death, it fails. He cannot cause her pain because his hatred lacks the depth of her malice. Rowling writes, "You need to mean it, Potter." Here, the boundary between good and evil is drawn not by magical skill, but by intent. The wand is powerless without the heart that wields it. Love, on the other hand, resists all spells. Voldemort, the Master of Death, spends his life seeking ways to subdue it. He crafts Horcruxes to split his soul, believing that immortality can be built like a fortress. Yet in the end, love, intangible, wordless, and non-magical, defeats him. Lily Potter's sacrifice shields Harry with an ancient protection, one that Voldemort never comprehends. Dumbledore explains it simply. He didn't realize that love as powerful as your mother's for you leaves its own mark. This mark is beyond any curse or counter-curse. It is the book's most profound statement. Magic cannot command love, nor can it destroy it. Even in the realm of the everyday, the wizarding world is not as advanced as it appears on screen. Their homes are often described as cold, dusty, and outdated. The burrow, for instance, though filled with warmth of spirit, is patched together with magic that barely holds. Mrs. Weasley's clock, which tracks her family's whereabouts, is ingenious, but the plumbing leaks and the ghoul in the attic moans endlessly. Wizards use enchanted fires to cook, but still hang laundry to dry. Their letters travel by owl. Charming, yes, but hardly efficient. Hermione, raised among muggles, often points out these absurdities. She knows that while wizards can summon light with lumos, they have never invented the light bulb. This irony deepens in the Ministry of Magic itself, the supposed pinnacle of magical civilization. Its bureaucrats scurry through enchanted elevators that still jam, and its offices depend on parchment memos that flutter like birds. The Ministry's collapse during Voldemort's rise shows how fragile magical institutions truly are. Spells cannot save a government from corruption or fear. When the system fails, no Protego shield can stop tyranny. Rowling's vision is strikingly human. Power, whether magical or political, is only as strong as the people who wield it. In contrast, the films often portray spells as cinematic explosions of light and color, stripping away the moral and emotional complexity of their use. When a duel erupts, wands flash like weapons, and victory seems to belong to the most skilled hand. But in the books, dueling is never just about technique. The duel between Harry and Snape in the Great Hall, for example, is not a contest of strength, but of grief. Snape refuses to fight back. his eyes filled not with fury, but with pain. Harry's magic is fierce, but Snape's restraint carries more weight. The battle is human, not mythical. Even the simplest spells betray limitation when examined closely. Reparo can mend objects, but it cannot mend trust. Obliviate can erase memories, but not the emotional scars they leave behind. Hermione uses it on her parents in Deathly Hallows, a decision that haunts her silently. She protects them, yes, but also erases herself from their lives. No wizard, however brilliant, can undo such loss. Magic offers convenience, not consolation. Another telling example lies in the realm of time. The Time Turner, introduced in Prisoner of Azkaban, seems at first a perfect tool to correct mistakes, but even this marvel is bound by fragility. A single misstep could unravel the fabric of time itself. Dumbledore warns Hermione awful things happen to wizards who meddle with time. The device, powerful as it is, becomes a burden. It does not grant mastery over fate, it only magnifies the consequences of choice. By the time of the 5th book, every Time Turner is destroyed in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Rowling removes them from the world as if to say, no one should ever be allowed to rewrite what has already been lived. The heart of the wizarding struggle is therefore not about learning stronger spells, but about confronting the limits of power. Consider Ron Weasley, whose insecurities are not cured by magic. When he abandons his friends in Deathly Hallows, no charm can undo the damage, only humility can. When he returns, wet and trembling, it is not Alohomora that opens Harry's forgiveness. It is love. Magic may help them survive, but it does not absolve them of being human. Rowling also shows how dependence on magic can become a weakness. The wizards of the pureblood families, such as the Malfoys, scorn Muggle innovation. Yet in doing so, they confine themselves to an outdated world. Their arrogance blinds them to progress. Arthur Weasley's fascination with plug sockets and rubber ducks mocked by others is, in truth, a quiet rebellion against stagnation. He sees that magic is not the only form of wonder, that human curiosity, even without spells, can create miracles of its own. The contrast between Harry and Voldemort reveals the ultimate truth about magical power. Both share the same gift, but their choices divide them. Voldemort uses magic to dominate and destroy, treating it as an extension of his ego. Harry uses it to protect, to love, to endure. When their wands meet for the last time, the outcome is not determined by stronger magic, but by deeper humanity. It was not your power, Dumbledore's voice reminds him later, but your choices. The Elder Wand, the mightiest wand in existence, recognizes not skill, but mercy. It refuses to serve the man who kills without understanding. Even in the quiet aftermath of war, Rowling keeps this theme alive. At the rebuilt Hogwarts, life resumes with imperfections intact. The castle's walls are scarred, portraits hang crooked, ghosts linger. Yet no spell is cast to erase the past. The survivors live with memory and pain, and that endurance becomes their truest strength. Wizards, for all their magic, must still heal the slow human way. Thus, when one looks back at the dazzling images of the film, the soaring spells, the effortless transformations, the triumphant battles, one begins to see the distortion. The real story was never about omnipotence. It was about limitation, humility, and the courage to face what no wand can fix. Magic, in Rowling's world, is only a mirror of the soul. In foolish hands, it is noise and vanity. In wise ones, it is a whisper of grace. Number 19. Not every hero was Harry's friend. In the shimmering illusion of the Harry Potter films, a comforting clarity reigns. Good and evil are painted in broad strokes. The Death Eaters wear black, the heroes stand in the light. and everyone who smiles at Harry seems to belong to his side. Yet, when one looks deeper into J.K. Rowling's books, that moral simplicity dissolves. The written world of Harry Potter is far more intricate, filled with people whose loyalties waver, whose fears outweigh their courage, and whose friendship with Harry is conditional, not absolute. The misunderstanding created by the films lies in the belief that everyone not allied with Voldemort was Harry's friend. In truth, even within the so-called light side, suspicion, jealousy, and human weakness thrived. When Harry returns from the Triwizard Tournament with the news of Voldemort's resurrection, the Ministry of Magic does not embrace him as a brave witness of the truth. Instead, it brands him a liar. Cornelius Fudge, terrified of losing his power, chooses denial over reality. He's not back. He can't be back. Fudge insists, as though repeating the lie could erase the terror of its alternative. This institutional blindness isolates Harry more profoundly than any dark spell. For an entire year, the boy who lived is treated as a dangerous fanatic. Newspapers mock him. The wizarding world whispers behind his back. This betrayal, carried out by the very society he saved, is one of the most painful lessons of his adolescence. Sometimes people would rather believe in comfort than in truth. Even the supposed heroes of the Resistance, the Order of the Phoenix, do not fully stand beside him. Dumbledore, out of love and misguided protection, withholds information that Harry desperately needs. "I cared about you too much," he confesses later. "I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth." This well-intentioned secrecy drives Harry into frustration and anger. At Grimmauld Place, the headquarters of the Order, the adults huddle in whispered meetings, leaving Harry, Ron, and Hermione outside the door, excluded from the very war they are already fighting. Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, becomes his only emotional refuge, yet even Sirius sees in Harry not only a godson, but a reflection of his lost youth, a replacement for James. The affection is real but complicated, born as much from nostalgia as from genuine understanding. Molly Weasley, the warm matriarch who loves Harry like one of her own, also reveals the limits of trust. She scolds Sirius for treating Harry like he's part of the Order, insisting that he is too young to know the full truth. Her protection is love, but also control. She is not Harry's enemy, yet she refuses to see him as equal to her adult sons. The films rarely linger on this conflict, but in the books, the tension between Molly and Sirius becomes symbolic of a larger divide between those who shelter the next generation and those who believe they must be allowed to face the darkness themselves. Even within Hogwarts, loyalty is a fragile, conditional thing. Take Cho Chang, for instance. Her brief romance with Harry in the Order of the Phoenix is a tangle of confusion and grief. She is mourning Cedric Diggory, who died in Harry's arms, and while she wants to believe Harry's account of Voldemort's return, fear and loss cloud her heart. When her friend Marietta Edgecombe betrays Dumbledore's army to Dolores Umbridge, Cho defends her, insisting she was pressured. The trust between her and Harry collapses. In that moment, readers see that being good does not guarantee strength or loyalty. The films soften this heartbreak into teenage drama, but in the book, it's a painful revelation. People do not always choose what is right, even when they want to. The teachers, too, are far from the perfect mentors the movies imply. Professor Snape's hatred of Harry is well known, but even beyond his personal cruelty lies a deeper moral ambiguity. Snape serves Dumbledore yet bullies students, protects Harry yet humiliates him. He is the embodiment of contradiction, neither villain nor hero, but a man whose love and bitterness wage an endless war within him. When Dumbledore says he has his mother's eyes, it is not just a reminder of Harry's resemblance to Lily, but a chain binding Snape to his past sins. The audience of the films learns late of Snape's sacrifice, but readers sense it much earlier, that strange, aching complexity of a man who fights for good without ever being good himself. Even Hermione Granger, the epitome of loyalty, has moments of doubt and moral struggle. In The Goblet of Fire, she confesses to Rita Skeeter that she feels overwhelmed by how fame isolates Harry. Later, she traps Rita in her animagus form, a beetle, to stop her lies, an act that is both clever and morally dubious. Hermione's righteousness bends when faced with injustice, showing that even the purest hearts can justify questionable actions in the name of good. Her friendship with Harry endures not because it is flawless, but because it survives imperfection. Ron Weasley, too, reveals cracks in the foundation of friendship. His envy of Harry's fame and fortune leads to painful ruptures. "You're always the hero," he spits during the Triwizard Tournament, doubting that Harry didn't enter himself. For the first time, Harry experiences betrayal not from an enemy, but from someone he calls brother. Their eventual reconciliation feels earned precisely because it acknowledges human weakness, jealousy, pride, fear. In the films, this quarrel is softened, a brief argument quickly resolved, but in the book, it's a lingering wound that shows how fragile friendship can be under pressure. Then there are those who straddle the line between friend and foe, like Percy Weasley. His ambition blinds him to truth. He sides with the Ministry, rejecting his family and their belief in Harry. "I'm a Ministry man," he declares proudly, sending back his mother's Christmas jumper. This act, so petty, yet so cruel, reflects how the thirst for respectability can poison even a decent heart. Percy is not evil, merely terrified of being wrong. His later redemption feels sincere because it comes with shame, the recognition that neutrality in times of moral crisis is its own kind of betrayal. Dolores Umbridge, though a clear antagonist, is a perfect example of how evil can disguise itself in pink cardigans and kitten plates. Unlike Voldemort, she does not seek immortality or conquest. She seeks order, control, and obedience, all under the banner of the Ministry. When she brands Harry a liar, forces him to write, "I must not tell lies," with a quill that carves the words into his skin, she becomes the face of bureaucratic evil, the polite smile of tyranny. She is a reminder that villains rarely see themselves as villains. In her mind, she is defending the Ministry from chaos. Rita Skeeter's gossip articles in the Daily Prophet deepen Harry's isolation. Her pen becomes a weapon sharper than any wand. She twists his grief into spectacle, painting him as disturbed and attention-seeking. Through her, Rowling exposes how public opinion can be manipulated and how society often destroys its heroes before celebrating them. Rita's lies contribute to Harry's loneliness more than Voldemort's threats ever could. The press, craving sensation, becomes another unseen adversary in Harry's world, one that smiles while cutting. Even Dumbledore's army, the symbol of youth, rebellion, and hope, is not without fractures. Some students join for curiosity, others for admiration, not conviction. When fear of Umbridge intensifies, attendance wanes, loyalty fades under pressure, a truth that echoes through the series. Courage is not constant. Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, and Ginny Weasley stand firm, but their bravery only shines brighter because so many others falter. It's not that Hogwarts students are weak, it's that they are human, and humanity is messy. Perhaps one of the most quietly painful betrayals comes from the adults' silence. When Harry suffers under Umbridge's reign, few teachers intervene. McGonagall helps when she can, but the system binds even her hands. The rest look away. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry realizes that authority, even benevolent authority, often chooses self-preservation over justice. The idea that good people can do nothing in the face of cruelty becomes one of the series' harshest truths. The films often portray the world of Harry Potter as a simple battlefield of light and dark, but the books whisper a different message. Good and evil live side by side in the same hearts. Every act of loyalty carries a shadow of doubt. Every act of defiance carries a cost. The Order of the Phoenix is not a fellowship of saints. It is a group of flawed humans who fight, argue, and make mistakes. Yet in that imperfection lies their humanity. Harry's journey is not about defeating Voldemort alone. It is about learning that goodness is fragile, that trust must be earned, and that growing up means seeing heroes as people, not icons. When the war finally ends, Harry's understanding of friendship, faith, and morality is no longer naive. He has seen how Dumbledore could lie, how Ron could abandon, how Hermione could deceive, and how the Ministry could destroy its own. But he has also seen redemption in Snape's sacrifice, in Percy's apology, in the quiet courage of ordinary students who chose to fight. The lesson the films often overlook is that Harry's victory is not only over darkness, but over illusion. The world is not divided between those who love him and those who hate him. It is made of people, all capable of both. Through this lens, the story of Harry Potter is not the fairy tale of good triumphing over evil, but the tale of a boy becoming a man who learns that the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. Those words, spoken by Sirius Black, echo as the true moral of the series, one that transcends spells and battles. The films may show us heroes in shining light, but the books reveal the truth. Sometimes the brightest wizards cast the longest shadows. And in recognizing that, Harry Potter becomes something greater than a savior. He becomes human. Number 20, the happy ending isn't entirely happy. The final image of the Harry Potter films is burned into the collective memory of millions. A sunlit King's Cross station, the steam of the Hogwarts Express curling around smiling faces, Harry and Ginny waving as their son Albus disappears into the crowd. It is a perfect ending, or seems to be. The audience leaves the cinema comforted by the thought that everything is as it should be. Evil is gone, peace restored, and love triumphant. Yet beneath this cinematic harmony lies a deeper truth that the books whisper, but the films silence. The truth is that there are no real happy endings after war, and the world of Harry Potter is no exception. In the novels, victory comes at a price that can never be repaid. The battle for Hogwarts ends not with triumph, but with silence, the kind that follows devastation. The bodies of Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, and Nymphadora Tonks lie side by side in the Great Hall. Even as Harry stands among the survivors, the words, "and the world was saved," ring hollow. The text lingers instead on exhaustion. He was aching all over, and the only thing he wanted was sleep. That moment, stripped of any cinematic glory, reveals the truth that the films smooth over, and the heroes have survived, but they are broken. The war has taken pieces of them that cannot be restored. Harry's journey from the cupboard under the stairs to the final duel with Voldemort is not a path to happiness but to awakening. When he kills the Dark Lord, he does not smile. He does not feel joy. Harry looked down at the body with a mixture of pity and revulsion, Rowling writes. That is not the feeling of a boy who has won a victory. It is the reaction of a man who has seen too much death. He has lived with Voldemort inside him, shared his thoughts, his rage, his fear. The darkness he destroyed is also a part of himself. The films end before we see what this means, before we understand that peace for Harry is not freedom, but a quiet exile within his own mind. Even the relationships that seem to symbolize renewal are built on the ruins of trauma. In the films, Ron and Hermione smile gently at each other, their hands intertwined, as if their love has healed everything. But the books show a more complex picture. They have seen death together, fought side by side, and lost friends they loved like family. Their bond is not just affection, it is survival. When Ron breaks down in the tent during their exile, it is Hermione who holds him together. And when she screams under Bellatrix's torture, it is Ron's voice that cries out her name. After the war, those memories do not vanish. They carry them into adulthood like invisible scars. The films suggest that the world they fought for has changed for the better, but the books hint otherwise. The Ministry of Magic, once corrupted by fear and manipulation, returns to normality too quickly. The same old faces, as Harry once described it, still sit behind desks. Prejudices remain, buried but alive, and the notion of blood purity, the suspicion toward half-bloods, the quiet disdain for muggle-borns. Kingsley Shacklebolt may be minister, but one man cannot cleanse an entire system. Rowling leaves traces of doubt, suggesting that even in peace, the seeds of old hatred can sprout again. The films, eager to give closure, skip over this unease. What becomes of Harry after the war is not the life of a fairy tale hero, but that of a survivor learning to exist. He works as an aura, hunting dark wizards, a profession that keeps him close to the shadows he can never fully escape. He sometimes dreamed of the forest again, the text implies, a forest where he walked toward death willingly, ready to die so others could live. That moment defines him forever. It is impossible to return to ordinary life after offering oneself to death and surviving. The smile we see on his face at King's Cross hides a lifetime of memory he can never forget. The films offer light, the books give us truth. The difference is subtle but profound. In the cinematic world, time erases pain, scars fade, laughter returns. But in Rowling's world, time merely teaches people how to live with pain. Neville Longbottom, hailed as a hero, carries the weight of his parents' madness. "They were tortured into insanity," he once said, his voice trembling. That past does not vanish with Voldemort's fall. It defines his courage and his sorrow. For him, like for Harry, the victory is bittersweet. Even the symbolic acts of naming children after the dead, which the films present as gestures of love, carry an undertone of melancholy. To name a child Albus Severus is to immortalize both wisdom and suffering, Dumbledore's burden of guilt and Snape's lonely atonement. Each name is a monument, a reminder that peace is built on sacrifice. The platform scene, often read as idyllic, is in truth a moment of remembrance disguised as joy. Every child carries the memory of those who fell, ensuring that the past will never truly rest. Hermione's life, too, is far from simple. The brilliant girl who once fought for house elf rights and justice becomes part of a world that still resists change. She works tirelessly at the ministry, reforming laws, fighting prejudice, often against the very people she once risked her life to save. The text implies her frustration, the slow pace of reform, the bureaucracy that suffocates progress. She is not disillusioned, but she is tired. The dream of equality that drove her as a student becomes a battle she must fight anew every day. Her strength lies not in victory, but in persistence. Ron, cheerful and brave, bears the quiet tragedy of being overshadowed even in peace. His brothers' deaths haunt him, Fred's laughter echoing in every joke-shop corner. He joins his brother George for a time, but the work is bittersweet. The films show none of this heaviness, yet the books let us glimpse it. The struggle to find meaning after chaos. Ron's humour, his defining trait, becomes both shield and healing salve. He needed to laugh, Rowling writes in an earlier scene, or he would break. That is the essence of him after the war, a man who laughs not because he is happy, but because he must survive. The younger generation, Teddy Lupin, Albus Potter, Rose Granger Weasley, inherits a world rebuilt on grief. They grow up with stories of bravery, but those stories are soaked in loss. Teddy never meets his parents. His godfather Harry knows that void all too well. When Harry tells his son about Snape's courage, it is not a bedtime tale. It is a confession of everything the world had to lose to gain a fragile peace. These children live under the weight of their parents' heroism, expected to be the continuation of a legend that nearly destroyed its heroes. There is also the lingering presence of the past, the ghosts that do not haunt physically but emotionally. Harry still keeps the resurrection stone buried deep in the Forbidden Forest, yet its memory haunts him. The temptation to see his parents again, to relive that moment when they walked beside him, is a shadow that never fades. His scar may not pain him, but the mark on his soul remains. The films close the door on this inner struggle, preferring the comfort of a healed wound. The books leave it open, raw, and real. One of the most striking differences between the two portrayals is the treatment of Dumbledore's legacy. In the films, he dies as a saint. In the books, he is revealed as a flawed man, burdened with guilt and ambition. Harry's discovery of his mentor's past, his friendship with Grindelwald, his sister, Ariana's death, shatters the boy's faith. By the end, his forgiveness is mature but not blind. He understands that even the greatest wizards carry darkness. That understanding, born of disappointment, marks the end of his innocence. The happy ending we see on screen denies the price of that growth. Perhaps the most painful truth of all is that war changes not only people, but their perception of goodness itself. When Harry uses the Elder Wand, he chooses to break it, refusing its power. He would not kill, Rowling writes, and that was his victory. Yet that choice is born not from hope, but from exhaustion. He has seen how power corrupts even those with noble hearts. His act is one of renunciation, not celebration. It is the gesture of a man who wants rest, not glory. The films, in their need for symmetry and satisfaction, turn tragedy into triumph. But the novels remind us that the true message of Harry Potter lies not in perfect endings but in endurance. It is a story of growing up through pain, of learning that evil never truly dies. It merely changes shape. The real magic is not in wands or spells, but in the ability to keep living, to rebuild, to remember. Harry's world is not healed, but it endures, and that perhaps is the truest kind of happy ending, one born not of illusion, but of survival. Number 21. Magical creatures are not just background decoration. In the films, magical creatures appear like glittering ornaments scattered across the landscape of Harry Potter's adventures. They awe and entertain. The majestic hippogriff spreads its wings under the pale Scottish sun. Dragons roar in tournaments, and thestrals pull the carriages of Hogwarts students through the mist. But in the books, each of these beings carries something much deeper. They are not simply living decorations or tools of cinematic spectacle. They are symbols, reflections of human emotion, fear, loss, pride, and compassion. J.K. Rowling's creatures are mirrors that reveal the unseen truths about the wizarding world and about the readers themselves. The Thestrals are perhaps the most misunderstood of them all. In the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry first sees them, those skeletal, bat-winged horses pulling the carriages to Hogwarts, he is not frightened, but curious. They are invisible to most of his friends. Only Luna Lovegood can see them too. When she explains, "You're not going mad, I can see them too. You saw someone die, that's why you can see them," the weight of that statement settles like a shadow. The Thestrals embody the invisible transformation that happens when one confronts death. They are not monsters, but witnesses. In the films they appear briefly, eerie yet elegant, a visual marvel, but in the book they are the very embodiment of grief turned into understanding. For Harry, they mark the point when innocence ends and maturity begins. Seeing the Thestrals means accepting that death exists, that it touches everything, and that life continues despite it. The centaurs, too, are stripped of their philosophical dimension on screen. In the films, they are rendered as proud and somewhat frightening forest dwellers, bow-wielding and mysterious. Yet in the Philosopher's Stone and later in the Order of the Phoenix, their portrayal is much more profound. They are the remnants of an ancient world where wisdom was not measured by human logic or ambition. Firenze, the centaur who saves Harry from Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest, speaks not of battles or power, but of the stars. "Mars is bright tonight," he says, a phrase that resonates with cosmic foreboding. The centaurs read the heavens like a sacred text, and they despise humans for their arrogance in believing they can control fate. Their existence is a constant reminder that knowledge without humility leads to ruin. In the forest, the centaurs stand between two worlds, the untamed and the civilized, the mystical and the rational. They are a warning to every wizard who thinks himself above nature. Then there is Dobby, the house elf, whose cinematic version often leans toward comic relief and sentimental heroism. In the book, however, Dobby is one of Rowling's most layered creations. His servitude is both tragic and illuminating. The house elves in the wizarding world are a reflection of moral blindness, a society built on comfort that refuses to question the suffering beneath it. Hermione's campaign for their freedom in the Goblet of Fire is often mocked by others, even by her closest friends, but it reveals the hypocrisy of the wizarding world that claims to stand against Voldemort's tyranny while quietly maintaining its own forms of slavery. Dobby's freedom, bought by the gift of a sock, becomes an almost biblical act of liberation. When he later dies protecting Harry and his friends, his death carries more weight than many battles. "Here lies Dobby, a free elf," the epitaph reads. In those words lies the moral backbone of the entire series. Freedom is sacred, and even the smallest creature can die a hero. Hippogriffs, with their noble bearing and fierce pride, are another symbol distorted by cinematic flash. Buckbeak, the creature Hagrid introduces in The Prisoner of Azkaban, is not simply a beast of flight, but an embodiment of respect. The ritual of bowing before a hippogriff is one of mutual acknowledgement. The creature's reaction depends entirely on the human sincerity. When Draco Malfoy mocks Buckbeak and is injured, it is not merely a physical punishment, it is a moral one. The scene illustrates the price of arrogance and the value of humility. Harry's gentle approach, his willingness to bow first, earns him the hippogriff's trust and flight. The moment when they soar over the lake is not just a triumph of magic, but a metaphor for harmony between species, between man and nature, between courage and reverence. Dragons, fierce and ancient, symbolize power untamed by morality. In the Goblet of Fire, Harry faces the Hungarian Horntail during the Triwizard Tournament. The film captures the spectacle, the fire, the chase, the tension, but misses the symbolic depth. The dragon is not his enemy, but his reflection. It represents fear, the kind that tests the soul rather than the body. When Harry calls his firebolt broom and faces the dragon head-on, he is not merely performing a task. He is facing himself, his terror, his anger, his will to survive. Rowling never lets her creatures exist without purpose. The dragon is a test of humanity. It is what happens when strength exists without conscience, a reminder of what Voldemort has become and what Harry could become if he forgets compassion. Even the seemingly grotesque creatures like the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets carry moral weight. The basilisk is born from deceit. It slithers through the walls of Hogwarts, a weapon controlled by those who value blood purity over life. Its gaze kills, not unlike prejudice itself. The monster is not the serpent, but the ideology that breeds it. In the end, when Harry faces the basilisk with the sword of Gryffindor, he is confronting the poison of the past, the arrogance of Salazar Slytherin, the blindness of generations. The creature becomes a symbol of inherited evil, one that must be destroyed not only by bravery, but by loyalty and sacrifice. In contrast, the Phoenix stands at the opposite end of the moral spectrum. Fawkes Dumbledore's Phoenix is the embodiment of resurrection, hope, and the cyclical nature of good. In the Chamber of Secrets, when Fawkes heals Harry's wound with his tears, the act is not mere magic, it is faith made tangible. The bird's rebirth from ashes reflects the heart of the entire saga, destruction and renewal, despair and redemption. When Dumbledore later dies and Fawkes' song echoes through the halls, the Phoenix becomes the voice of mourning and continuity. Its cry tells the reader that true goodness never dies, it transforms. Even the acromantulas, monstrous as they are, reflect Rowling's understanding of fear. Aragog, the giant spider who lives in the Forbidden Forest, is terrifying, yet his story is tragic. He was once a misunderstood creature, falsely accused, hunted by those who feared what they did not understand. Hagrid's loyalty to him, despite his danger, shows that compassion often exists in unlikely places. The films make Aragog a creature of horror, but in the book he is a symbol of loyalty misplaced, of bonds that defy reason but not emotion. The merpeople in The Goblet of Fire also offer more than eerie atmosphere. In the depths of the Black Lake, their society mirrors the Wizarding One, structured, proud, and often indifferent to outsiders. Harry's refusal to abandon the other hostages during the second task reveals his empathy, a virtue the merpeople, with all their beauty and mystery, lack. He is too noble to take only his own, Dumbledore later remarks. The encounter under the lake becomes an allegory for the hidden depths of conscience, the idea that morality is measured not by winning, but by compassion. Even the smaller, seemingly irrelevant beings carry messages. The boggart, which takes the shape of one's greatest fear, is a psychological lesson wrapped in humour. Professor Lupin's spell, Ridiculous, transforms terror into laughter, teaching that fear loses power when faced with understanding. The films treat it as a clever trick. The book treats it as wisdom. Every creature, from the Dementor to the Pixie, teaches a moral truth disguised as a magical event. The Dementors themselves are among Rowling's most profound inventions. They feed on happiness, leaving behind emptiness and despair. They are the perfect embodiment of depression, of the kind of darkness that cannot be fought with swords or spells, but with light, Patronus light. You can't give a Dementor the slip by hiding under the bed, says Lupin. They sense hope and drain it out of you. The Patronus charm, requiring a memory of pure joy, is a spiritual act of resistance. In the films, the Dementors serve as dark figures of suspense, but in the books they represent the human struggle to preserve one's inner light when all warmth is gone. The creatures of Rowling's world are not decorative, they are sacred metaphors. The Thestral teaches acceptance of loss, the Hippogriff humility, the house elf sacrifice, the dragon courage, the phoenix hope. Each of them is a part of a grand moral tapestry. Stripped of this depth, as in the films, they become spectacles, beautiful but hollow. In the pages of the books, however, they breathe, they live not to impress, but to reveal. Each feather, fang, and hoof carries a fragment of meaning that reminds the reader, the magic of this world is not in the spells or the battles, but in understanding what it means to be human. Number 22, Harry's parents weren't perfect. James Potter was never the flawless hero the films made him out to be. Behind the romantic image of a brave Gryffindor who fought Voldemort and loved Lily with all his heart, stood a young man full of arrogance and pride. Readers who dive deep into Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix remember the chilling moment when Harry sees his father through the eyes of the pensive, a teenager laughing at another student's humiliation. In that memory, James hexes Severus Snape in front of a crowd, hanging him upside down and exposing him to ridicule. "Leave him alone," Lily Evans shouts, but James only grins. It is a scene that shattered Harry's idealized vision of his parents, forcing him to face a painful truth. The people he lost were not saints, but flawed, impulsive, very human individuals. Lily, the symbol of kindness and self-sacrifice in the films, was not without complexity either. Her compassion for Severus Snape had once been genuine, a bond forged through years of shared childhood and whispered secrets by the river in Spinner's End. Yet as she grew older and distanced herself from his obsession with the dark arts, she also wounded him deeply, not out of cruelty but out of helplessness. Snape, desperate for her understanding, turned toward the one thing that destroyed their friendship, Voldemort's ideology. When Lily turned away, it was an act of moral strength, but also one that left both hearts scarred. Her forgiveness had limits, and that boundary defined the tragedy of both their lives. What the films chose to simplify into a neat love triangle, good Lily, good James, evil Snape, was in the books a painful story about youth, pride, and the irreversible consequences of choices made too soon. James's bullying was not a fleeting moment of immaturity. It was a reflection of how power, popularity, and privilege could twist even good intentions. Sirius Black once admitted that they were arrogant little Burks in school. The Marauders, James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, were heroes of the future, yes, but in Hogwarts they were rule-breakers who often blurred the line between bravery and cruelty. It was easy for them to mock a lonely boy who had no friends, especially one who admired the dark arts. In that pensive memory, Harry does not see the noble father he had imagined. He sees a boy who acted for applause, not justice. For Snape, that humiliation was the scar he never forgot. Every glance at Harry's face reminded him of James's smirk, the same untidy hair, the same defiant grin. His hatred was never just for the boy who lived, it was for the reflection of his own past pain. Yet beneath that hatred there was something deeper, a loyalty born from love, guilt, and the memory of Lily. This makes the moral world of Harry Potter so much richer than the films portray. Lily's death was not just the martyrdom of a saintly mother, it was the culmination of years of choices made by flawed people trying to do the right thing in a broken world. Readers often overlook how Dumbledore's words to Harry about his father carry a bittersweet truth. Your father was a great man. he says, but only at the end. That phrase is crucial. James became a great man not because he was born noble, but because he changed. He grew up. He left behind his childish arrogance and began to understand the weight of responsibility. By the time Voldemort came for him, James was no longer the bully by the lake. He was a husband, a father, and a man ready to die protecting his family. The films rarely hint at this transformation, flattening his journey into a single, spotless act of heroism. Lily's moral strength was also more complex in the books. She was not merely a victim of Voldemort's cruelty, but a woman who made a conscious choice. When she stood between Harry and death, it was not blind courage. It was a decision rooted in love, forgiveness, and defiance. She knew what Voldemort had become, and she faced him unarmed. Her sacrifice was born not from perfection, but from understanding. She saw the cost of hatred through Snape's downfall and refused to let her child inherit that same darkness. Her final act was her redemption, not proof of moral infallibility. The films often omit the emotional contradiction that haunted Harry after he saw his father's memory. He could not reconcile the laughing bully in the pensive with the nobleman his parents' friends remembered. That dissonance shaped his understanding of right and wrong. He began to question the world in shades of grey. Why had Dumbledore trusted Snape? Why had Sirius justified their cruelty as just fun? And why did the people he admired most also carry deep flaws? This realization marked Harry's true coming of age. It was not defeating Voldemort that made him mature. It was learning to forgive the imperfect past that created him. The legacy of the Potters was not purity, but imperfection redeemed. James's transformation was mirrored in Harry's own journey. The same pride that once made James torment Snape now appeared in Harry's anger during his 5th year, when he shouted at his friends and felt isolated from everyone who loved him. Yet unlike his father, Harry learned self-reflection faster. He began to understand what power without humility could do, because he had seen it destroy both his father's rival and his godfather. The ghost of James's mistakes guided Harry's moral growth more than any sermon could. Severus Snape's story intertwines painfully with the Potters. His love for Lily was obsessive, flawed, but real. It was that same love that saved Harry countless times. In a bitter twist of fate, the man who once called her Mudblood became her son's secret protector. This irony, that salvation can come from guilt and loyalty from remorse, stands at the heart of Rowling's narrative. The films soften it, turning Snape's actions into a tragic gesture of love, but the books show something far more haunting, a man haunted by his own cruelty, trying to atone by guarding the living reminder of everything he lost. Lily's rejection of Snape was an act of survival, but it also revealed the limits of her compassion. She could not save him from himself, and she could not forgive his choice of darkness. That boundary defines her humanity. She was capable of both tenderness and firmness, and this made her love more real than any idealized image. When readers understand this, her final sacrifice becomes even more powerful. Not the act of a flawless saint, but of a woman who had faced betrayal, pain, and still chose to protect life over vengeance. Harry's confrontation with these truths also explains his deep empathy toward others. When he forgave Dudley, when he spared Peter Pettigrew, when he refused to kill even in battle, these moments were reflections of the moral complexity he inherited from his parents. James taught him bravery, but Lily taught him mercy. Their flaws made those lessons meaningful. The perfection shown in the films would have offered no depth, no conflict, no humanity. But in the books, their imperfection becomes the foundation of Harry's moral compass. One of the most striking examples of this moral tension comes during Harry's talk with Lupin after discovering the truth about Snape's memories. Lupin admits that James grew up. Those two words redeem everything. Growing up, that is the true theme of the Potter family's story. Not being perfect, but becoming better. James stopped mocking others and began protecting them. Lily stopped forgiving endlessly and learned to stand firm. Together they built a fragile, real love that did not erase their past, but transformed it. When Voldemort came, it was that love, imperfect but true, that defeated him for the first time. The myth of saintly parents was comforting for Harry in his early years. It gave him something pure to believe in, a memory to cling to in the cupboard under the stairs. But reality, when it arrived, made him stronger. The truth did not destroy the image of his parents. It humanized them. It taught him that goodness does not mean being flawless. It means choosing love despite flaws. This understanding prepared him for the ultimate moral test, facing death without hatred, just as they had done. Even Dumbledore, the wisest of wizards, once told Harry that he saw so much of both your parents in him, not just their courage, but also their stubbornness and temper. This was no compliment disguised as praise. It was a warning. Power and pride walk hand in hand. James once used his power for mockery and Voldemort for domination. The thin line between them is what Harry had to recognize and never cross. That realization was his true inheritance. In the end, the illusion of perfect parents fades, replaced by something far more precious, the understanding that love, flawed and human, is stronger than any spell. The Potter's story is not a tale of saints and villains. It is a story of mistakes redeemed by sacrifice, of arrogance tempered by growth, and of love powerful enough to outlive death itself. The films gave us heroes, the books gave us people. And that difference, subtle yet profound, is what makes the world of Harry Potter timeless. Number 23, prophecies don't always come true. In the magical world of Harry Potter, few ideas have shaped the story as powerfully as the notion of prophecy. Yet, among those who know this universe only through the films, a misunderstanding persists, a belief that prophecies are absolute, that destiny governs every action, and that Harry was born to defeat Voldemort no matter what. But J.K. Rowling, through her writing, made something far more profound. She crafted a world where prophecy is not a sentence carved in stone, but a reflection of human choice. Fate, she suggests, only works when people act as if it must. The difference may seem subtle, but it transforms the entire meaning of the story. The books remind us that the real magic of the wizarding world lies not in the spells or wands, but in the free will of those who wield them. The prophecy that shaped Harry's life was first spoken by Sybil Trelawney in a small room above the Hogshead pub. Her trembling voice declared that the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month, dies. To Dumbledore this was a mystery wrapped in destiny, but to Voldemort it was a warning, and one he could not ignore. The Dark Lord acted on what he heard, believing that if he struck first, he could defy fate. Yet in that act of fear and arrogance, he created the very thing he tried to prevent. He marked the child, as the prophecy said, and gave Harry the power to destroy him. The tragedy is circular, almost Shakespearean. Voldemort made the prophecy real by believing in it. This is where Rowling's genius lies. She reveals that prophecy is not an external force guiding the characters, but a mirror reflecting their inner choices. Voldemort's downfall begins not with a curse or a battle, but with a decision, to believe in a fragment of words overheard through a door. When Severus Snape carried that piece of the prophecy to his master, he did not imagine that a few sentences would alter the course of history. But this is precisely Rowling's point. Destiny is fragile until someone gives it weight. Voldemort's obsession with control, with mastering life and death, left him blind to the truth that his greatest enemy was not fate, but his own fear of. The films, however, strip away much of this complexity. They present the prophecy as something inevitable, an ancient decree that binds both Harry and Voldemort. The cinematic narrative leans toward the idea that Harry was chosen, that his path was written from birth. But in the novels, the opposite is true. Dumbledore explains to Harry in The Order of the Phoenix, it was, however, the interpretation of the prophecy that mattered. Voldemort himself chose the boy he thought most likely to be a danger to him. Those words dissolve the illusion of destiny. It is Voldemort's choice that binds him to Harry, not an invisible cosmic law. In that sense, Harry's victory is not fate fulfilled, but fate rewritten by courage. When Harry finally learns about the prophecy, he feels the weight of inevitability pressing on him. He believes he must kill or be killed, as if there were no alternative. Yet Dumbledore's wisdom gently corrects this fear. "Do you think every prophecy in the Hall of Prophecy has been fulfilled?" he asks. The question carries a quiet rebellion against fatalism. Dumbledore knows that prophecies are only signposts. They can point toward possibilities, but it is people who choose the road. What Voldemort never understood, Harry comes to grasp fully, that freedom lies in choice, even in the shadow of fate. The tension between destiny and choice becomes one of the saga's most powerful themes. When Harry decides to walk into the Forbidden Forest to face death, it is not because prophecy demands it, but because he chooses to. The films often portray this moment as fulfillment of a predestined path, but in the book, the language is deliberate and defiant. "He was not afraid," Rowling writes. "He was walking to meet life, not death." These words shift the meaning entirely. Harry is not an instrument of prophecy. He is a man acting out of love and acceptance. His victory is not in defeating Voldemort, but in rejecting the fear that shaped Voldemort's every move. If we trace this idea backward, it reshapes every key moment of the story. Consider the night in Godric's Hollow. Had Voldemort ignored the prophecy, Harry would have remained an ordinary child. There would have been no scar, no Horcrux, no boy who lived. The prophecy was self-fulfilling, not divine. Voldemort's choice to act gave it life. Even Dumbledore admits this truth later. Had Voldemort never heard of the prophecy, it would never have been fulfilled. These words dismantle the idea of inevitability entirely. Rowling uses them to remind readers that even in a world of magic, the greatest force is the will to choose differently. The concept echoes through other characters as well. Neville Longbottom, born just one day before Harry, fits the prophecy's description too. He too was born to parents who thrice defied Voldemort, and he too arrived as July ended. Voldemort could have chosen Neville, and the story would have unfolded differently. This detail is crucial. It means that the prophecy did not name Harry. Voldemort did. The chosen one was chosen not by destiny, but by the hand of the villain himself. It is perhaps the most poetic irony in the series. The tyrant who sought to master fate instead became its servant. Even Sybil Trelawney, the seer herself, serves as a symbol of uncertainty. Most of her predictions are laughable, wrapped in theatrics and nonsense. The only two true prophecies she ever made were both spoken in trance without her knowledge. She is not a vessel of divine truth, but a reminder that knowledge of the future is unreliable, slippery, and dangerous. Her very character is Rowling's warning. Even a prophecy that turns out to be true may only become true because people act as though it must. Belief becomes the architect of reality. The tragedy of Voldemort is that he could never comprehend this. He treated prophecy as weapon, not as warning. His entire life revolved around escaping death, creating Horcruxes, splitting his soul, commanding fear. In his obsession, he chained himself to the very destiny he sought to avoid. The prophecy said neither can live while the other survives, but had Voldemort not marked Harry, there would have been no other. He built his own nemesis, carved his doom with his own wand. Every act of domination led him closer to defeat, because he could never understand that fate bends to those who accept it, not those who resist it with cruelty. For Harry, the opposite journey unfolds. Each book brings him closer to realizing that freedom does not come from denying prophecy, but from seeing through it. He learns that love, loyalty, and sacrifice shape outcomes far more than predictions. When he spares Draco, when he trusts Dumbledore's army, when he chooses to die without resistance, these moments redefine what destiny means. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore tells him, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." This sentence, so often quoted, is the key to Rowling's philosophy. It dismantles the myth of inevitability entirely. Even after the final battle, the echoes of prophecy remain. When Harry stands in the Great Hall holding the Elder Wand, he does not see himself as a conqueror fulfilling fate. He sees himself as a man who chose mercy. He breaks the wand, rejecting power, rejecting destiny. It is the ultimate act of free will, the symbolic end of prophecy itself. The boy who was told he must kill the Dark Lord chooses instead to end the cycle of vengeance. The films, again, only hint at this depth, but the book lingers on it, allowing readers to feel the quiet triumph of a soul that has finally stepped beyond the boundaries of prediction. Rowling, through this narrative, challenges one of the oldest human beliefs, that the future is written. In her world, magic is not a map of destiny, but a canvas of possibilities. Every spell, every prophecy, every choice is an act of creation. Harry's story is not about a boy fated to save the world. It is about a boy who learns that fate is only real when we surrender to it. In that light, the prophecy becomes not a curse, but a test, a measure of whether we will let fear dictate our lives or whether we will have the courage to write our own endings. The beauty of this idea is that it extends beyond the pages of fantasy. Readers who once saw the prophecy as a divine decree now recognize it as a mirror of real life. How often do people become what they fear simply because they believe it is unavoidable? Voldemort's tragedy belongs to every person who acts from fear instead of faith. Harry's victory belongs to those who understand that destiny is not something found in stars or scrolls, but in the choices made each day. Rowling turns magic into a metaphor for humanity, a spell woven not of words but of will. Thus the true magic of Harry Potter lies in the invisible thread that connects prophecy and freedom. The films gave us a story of a boy chosen by fate. The books gave us something greater, a boy who chose himself. And in that choice he proved that no prophecy, no matter how ancient, can command the heart of a free soul. Number 24, heroes don't start out great. In the cinematic version of Harry Potter, everything seems smoother, cleaner, and almost effortless. The trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, grow from uncertain children to courageous heroes with remarkable grace. The films, by the very nature of their limited time, had to compress their emotional journeys into scenes that sparkle but rarely bleed. Yet the truth hidden in J.K. Rowling's books tells another, much deeper story. One of pain, anger, misunderstanding, and loss. Greatness in the wizarding world, just like in ours, never arrives overnight. It is carved through mistakes, regrets, and choices that cost something real. Harry Potter, as he appears in the books, is not the flawless, chosen one the films often suggest. He is impulsive, stubborn, and sometimes cruel in his confusion. His outbursts in the Order of the Phoenix are a portrait of a young man torn between fear and frustration. When he screams, "I don't want to be human," in Dumbledore's office, pounding his fists against the desk after Sirius's death, we see not a hero, but a grieving boy who has lost another person he loves. That fury, that raw inability to accept destiny, is what makes him human. The movies soften these edges, offering us a calmer Harry, braver, quieter, and somehow always ready to do what must be done. But in the pages of the books, heroism feels heavier, as if every victory comes with a scar that never quite heals. Ron Weasley, too, is stripped of his depth on screen. The films often use him for comic relief, but in the books, Ron's growth is one of the most painful and genuine arcs in the entire saga. He is the boy overshadowed by brothers, constantly feeling less talented than Bill, less brave than Charlie, less successful than Percy, and less special than Harry. His insecurities are the heart of his humanity. In the Goblet of Fire, when Ron refuses to speak to Harry after his name emerges from the goblet, it isn't jealousy born from pettiness, it's the ache of a friend who has always been second best, suddenly watching his closest companion rise even higher. Rowling writes, Ron looked oddly shifty, as though he too wasn't quite sure why he'd come. That single line holds an entire world of unspoken emotion. Hermione Granger, portrayed in the films as almost unshakable, is far more fragile and vulnerable in the novels. Her brilliance isolates her, her perfectionism suffocates her. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, the endless tension caused by her use of the time-turner, her fear of failure, and her loneliness create cracks in her composure. She breaks down in tears after being mocked by Draco and losing control of her emotions, slapping him across the face, a moment that shows she is not the calm intellect of the films, but a girl carrying far too much pressure for her age. Her strength is born not from calm wisdom, but from learning to endure the storm of expectation. In the Deathly Hallows, Ron's decision to leave their camp during the hunt for Horcruxes is one of the most brutal moments in the series. In the film, it passes quickly, a quarrel, a disappearance, and a return. In the book, it lingers like a wound. The cold, endless rain outside their tent mirrors the emotional frost between them. Ron's words are cutting, born of exhaustion and hopelessness. "You don't know how it feels. You're not the one who's got nothing," he shouts before disapparating into the darkness. That moment defines his character, not his eventual return, but his breaking point. The hero's path is never a straight line. For Ron, greatness is not about loyalty that never wavers. It's about having the courage to come back after failing it. Harry's anger at Dumbledore is another moment that the films barely touch, yet it reveals one of the most essential truths about growing up. In the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's silence becomes unbearable for Harry, who feels abandoned and betrayed. Rowling describes how Harry's hands were shaking uncontrollably. He had never felt so angry in his life. His fury is not just at Dumbledore, but at fate itself, at being a pawn in a game he cannot understand. The wizarding world sees him as the chosen one, but in that moment he feels chosen for pain. When Dumbledore finally explains, Harry doesn't feel relief, he feels the weight of inevitability. The films often make this revelation heroic, but in the books it is devastating. Even Hermione's unwavering rationality falters. In The Deathly Hallows, when she tries to keep the group focused after Ron leaves, she breaks. Rowling writes, Hermione's eyes were red and puffy. She had been crying for hours. The girl who once had every answer now has none. That image of Hermione sobbing beside an extinguished campfire is far more heroic than any spell she ever casts. It shows that strength is not the absence of despair, but the will to move despite it. The trio's friendship, too, is far from unbreakable. It fractures and heals again and again under the weight of fear. Their arguments, from the early fights about Crookshanks and Scabbers to the bitter silences in the tent, expose the delicate nature of trust. The films often portray them as inseparable, but in the books their bond is constantly tested. Their love for each other is not perfect. It's earned, fought for, and rebuilt after every storm. What makes their journey so powerful is the absence of instant greatness. Harry does not save Sirius. He cannot stop Cedric's death. He fails to protect Dobby. His wand breaks. His trust in authority, in Dumbledore, in the Ministry, in even Snape, shatters repeatedly. Each of these failures strips away the illusion of destiny and forces him to act not because he is the chosen one, but because he chooses to be. That distinction, invisible in the films, is what defines his character.